As I promised you last lecture, today we have an unusual lecture in English, and the topic of our lecture is great reforms of Alexander II. This is a period of the second half of the 19th century, and we try to discuss the next questions. Okay. Subjects of our lecture. The first problem we are going to discuss is backgrounds and reasons of the modernization of Alexander II. The second point is emancipation of serfs. Emancipation of serfs that was created in 1861, and the third one is introduction of земствas. Земство is a municipal local government, and it was introduced in 1864. The fourth question is judicial reform, a reform of court system in 1864 as well. The next one, reform of city government system, reform of city government system. Reform of city government system. Military reforms. Reforms of education system, and constitutional project of the Minister of Interior, Loris Melnikov. Успели, да? So we try to discuss all these questions, and after that I'll try to answer your questions if you will have. Okay, are you ready? Okay, so let's go. If you speak English not so well, I'll try to speak not so quickly. I'll try to repeat, and you can ask me about some questions if you have. Okay? So, let's start. Okay, the next slide. The first problem we try to speak, backgrounds and reasons. Backgrounds and reasons of the modernization. In historiography, there are two main approaches. The first approach is traditional. It was widespread in Soviet historiography, in Soviet history, and contemporary historians prefer modern approach. Traditional approach is connected with the crisis of feudal serfdom system. Feudal serfdom system, you know this phrase? Феодально-крепостническая система. Да? Feudal serfdom system. So, traditional historians think the crisis of feudal serfdom system was the main reason, main factor of reforms. this crisis had the following marks. The first factor, reduction of bread export. As you know, Russia during 18th and the first half of 19th century was the greatest exporter of bread exporter in Europe. And in the middle of the 19th century, bread export became less. And this was the first indicative of crisis. The next one, ruin of gentry and nobles. Ruin of gentry and nobles. Gentry, дворяне, да? Дворянство. Gentry and nobles, or nobility. No, peasant. Nobles, аристократия, aristocracy. Помещики, земельная аристократия. And ruin of gentry and nobles. It sounds strange, but in the middle of 19th century, about 45% of nobles had 20 serfs, and 3.5% had no serfs in their estates. And 3.5. Okay? This is the figure. 20 serfs, and this percent without serfs. Without serfs. And the next factor, financial crisis. Financial crisis of the state. Financial crisis of the state. And the last one, social dissatisfaction and peasant protests. Protest movement in this period became strong and spread, widespread. Okay. This is traditional approach. And the modern approach is connected with the Crimean War. As you know, Russia had a defeat in Crimean War. Crimean War was in 1853, 1856. And the reasons of the defeat were the following points. The first reason, technical backwardness, incompetence of leadership, of military leadership, and corruption inside the state machine. Corruption inside the state machine. If you read Sevastopol novels of Lev Tolstoy, you remember that corruption in all levels of the state was the main factor of defeat. Okay. So, by the terms of the Paris Treaty, Allies guaranteed the integrity of Turkey and protection of Christian subject of Porta, and the Strait Convention of 1841 was reaffirmed, the Black Sea neutralized and closed to Russian warships. Strait Convention of 1841 was reaffirmed. We are speaking about conditions, yeah? Conditions of Paris Treaty. Paris Treaty of 1856. And the first condition, reaffirmation of Strait Convention of 1841. Neutralized, the Black Sea was neutralized, and it means Russian warships couldn't be in the Black Sea. And the territory of Russia, as for the territory of Russia, Russia had territory losses. Part of Bessarabia came to Moldavia, and the part of mouth of Danube and Caucasian fortress Kars came to Turkey. Yeah? Danube, mouth of Danube, and fortress of Kars. Okay. So, defeat in Crimean War made reforms, as modern historians think. The first reform was the emancipation of serfs. Serf is a emancipation of serfs. Emancipation of serfs was made in 1861. Alexander II came to the throne at the age of 37, and he had proved the friend of reaction, faithful ally of landlord aristocracy, nobility, and in April of 1856, after the Paris Treaty was signed, Alexander said his famous words: "It's better to abolish serfdom from above than wait until it begins to abolish itself from below." So it means the beginning of emancipation. The next slide, please. Stages of Emancipation Act. Stages of self-emancipation. Stages. As you know, the emperor had no specific plan of the reform, and in 1857 the private committee of servants was established. It consisted of landlord nobility, and private committee recommended the government to liberate peasantry without lands. Okay? At the beginning of 1858, the private committee was renamed. It was renamed into the main committee, and local drafting committees were setting up in 46 provinces. in 46 provinces. In 46 provinces. In February 1859, reduction commissions under General Rostovtsev were made. Reduction commissions. Purpose of reduction commissions was codification of the complete document. Purpose of the reduction commissions was the codification of complete document, and the final stage was the State Council. State Council considered the project of peasantry law in 1860 and signed it. Emperor signed it. After that, imperial edict was signed on the 19th of February in 1861. Imperial edict, Tsarский manifest. Imperial edict was signed on the 19th of February in 1861. So, what did peasantry receive? General principles of the edict are the following. The first idea: peasants received personal freedom, but personal freedom without land. Peasantry received personal freedom without land. But peasants could pay the allotments. Allotment is nadel. And government gave credits for these aims. The third point: government gave credits to peasants, and the period of credit was 49 years. During this period, during 49 years, peasants were dependent on their landlords. Peasants were dependent on their landlords. Moreover, during 9 years after the imperial edict, peasants could not leave estates of their landlords. During 9 years, peasants couldn't leave their estates. And the last point of the edict was peasant government. Imperial edict made peasants government, self-government. It consisted of starostas, elders, and the elected assembly. Elected assembly we can translate as сельский сход. Peasant elected assembly. Okay. In this picture, you can see peasants who are reading positions of imperial edict. And what evaluations of the reform, what results of reform? Liberty for the emancipated peasant was only a half liberty. Peasant now can enjoy the right to marry as he pleased. He enjoyed to own property, to go to law, but peasant had no equality rights, civil rights with other social groups. And he continued to pay the poll tax. He was still subject of corporal punishment. Corporal punishment we can translate as a телесное наказание. So only peasants in Russian Empire during this period had a corporal punishment, were subject to corporal punishment. And as what's important to remark, peasant was still bound to commune. Commune is a commune. And old passport system was saved, and peasant could not leave his or her commune. He was unable to leave the locality. As for size of peasant allotment, size of allotment, it was about 8 acres. 8 acres. 8 acres per male. And if you imagine 8 acres, it was not enough. It was hopelessly uneconomic because Russian agriculture was low level, and peasant had neither the capital nor the knowledge to improve his agriculture methods. The next slide. So, if we sum up all the results, we can divide them into 2 groups, positive and negative. Positive results of the reform. Peasants received personal freedom and civil rights. Peasants received personal freedom and civil rights. Right to own, right to marry, right to go to law, and so on. The next positive result, state support. State support, credits for paying allotments, state support. The third one, introduction of government, self-government. Introduction of the rural self-government. If you pay attention to the next group, negative results. So, the first negative factor was that peasants did not have equal rights with other classes. Peasants did not have lands as private owners. peasants did not have lands as private owners. And what's important, redemption payment. What is a redemption payment? Выкупной платеж. Redemption payments were calculated higher than real value of the land in 2 times. Higher than real market price, yeah? In 2 times. And the last negative result, temporary position, временно обязанное, да? Временно обязанное положение, temporary position, during 49 years. During 49 years. Okay, are you ready? No? That's why, That's why majority of peasantry received the imperial edict negatively, and they created protest movement, riots, peasant disturbances after the reform, because of these negative positions. Yeah? So the next question, liberal reforms, and the next reform was земство. Okay. Yeah. This is a picture collecting of areas gone last call. Artist Kazuhi, collection of areas. Yeah. The next question, introduction of земствос. Introduction of земствос. The emancipation of serfs could not stand alone. Personal freedom had changed the face of society. It determined reconstruction of local self-government system, court and law system, and at the first place, self-government system. Introduction of земствос began in 1864. New law allowed for the creation of elected local councils. Which were called земствос. Elected local councils, земствос. And земствos were set up at the district, уезд, and gubernia, province level. District and province level. District or уезд assembly, земское собрание in Russian, district assembly was elected for 3 years. It was met for 10 days a year. And chose a permanent governing board. Земская управа was called. permanent governing board. Uprava consisted of 6 persons, and sent representatives to the provincial земства. Provincial assembly or земское собрание of губернии. Provincial assembly. Provincial assembly functioned the same way. The same council, provincial council, земская управа, and provincial assembly. Election to земствas were based on indirect system of voting in 3 separate categories. 3 curias, 3 elective curias. The first curia was landlords, the second one townspeople, and the third one peasants. 3 separate categories or curias. What are the tasks of земствas? Local councils, земства councils, were empowered to make a tax for such tasks as the repair of roads and bridges, tasks of земствas. Tasks of земствas. The first, the repair of roads and bridges. Creation of elementary schools, primary or elementary schools. Creation of public health services, technical aid in farming, etc. Земствas were set up only in European part of Russia, and in the end of 70s, there were about 34 provinces where земства were established. 34 provinces in the end of 70s. Okay, that was the next. Yeah. Look in this picture, you can imagine what земства were presented at that time. The picture was called "Земство is having a lunch," and now here you can see what sort of people had job in земствas. Okay. As for evaluation of земская reform of земствas, there are 2 approaches.
One is negative and the next one is positive. Vladimir Lenin called zemstvas the fifth wheel in the cart of Russian government. The fifth wheel, you know wheel, yeah? Колесо. In the cart, телега, of Russian government. Fifth wheel doesn't work. Yeah? Fifth wheel doesn't work. Why? Zemstva assemblies and houses were not allowed as an agency to communicate with each other. They didn't have coercive power because the police did not obey them. Their activities of zemstvas monitored by the governor and the Minister of the Interior. Minister of the Interior, Minister внутренних дел. Yeah? So Ministry of the Interior controlled zemstvas activities. That's why zemstvas were called fifth wheel in the cart. The next question, judicial reform. Judicial reform. In December of 1864 came the reform of the law system. The reform was closely modeled upon Western practice, and it was generally considered one of the most successful and most consistent reforms. What position of judicial reform? The first one, independence of the court and the principle of equal justice for all. Independence of the court. The second, judges were to be irremovable. Judges were to be irremovable. The third one, court proceedings were to be held in public. Court proceedings were to be held in public. The next one, improvement of the prosecution and defense system. Prosecution and defense system. What way? By the way of creation independent barrister corporation. Bar Corporation, Институт присяжных поверенных. Присяжные поверенные – это название адвокатуры, да, тогда? Адвокат. Barrister Corporation. And wide introduction of jury trial. Jury. What is jury? Присяжные. Jury trial. And creation of justice of peace. Justices of peace. Justices of peace. Мировые судьи. Justices of peace. Creation of justices of peace. Okay? Are you ready? Okay. And Alexander II introduced a unified two-level court system. Two-level court system. It was consisted of general judicial settlements, and local judicial settlements. General judicial settlements included Senate as a higher court in the Russian Senate, judicial chambers, in civil and criminal cases, judicial chambers, and district courts. District courts. District courts. Local judicial settlements. Local judicial settlements established local courts with justices of the peace. With justices of the peace. These justices were elected by Zemstva assemblies. They were elected by Zemstva assemblies. The next reform was the city government reform. City government reform was made in 1870. In 1870, it was a reconstruction of existing towns, councils, and on the slide you can see structure of the city government. Structure of the city government. City assembly, Duma, city council, Uprava, and major city or city head, Golova in Russian lexics. That epoch, it was Golova, towns Golova. City assembly was elected for 4 years. It was ruled by city head. And city assembly or Duma chose city council for 4 years as well. City council. Elections to Duma were based on the indirect voting. In three couriers. Large taxpayers, middle taxpayers, and small taxpayers. Large taxpayers, middle taxpayers, and small taxpayers. The functions of city government. The first function, management of municipal economy. Collecting the necessary data for the city council. Compilation of urban estimates. Collection of fees and expenses of the city. The urban reform consolidated the system of urban public management. One result of the reform is the communication of the society to civilian life. And the next reform or reforms was a series of military reforms. Military reforms were held in 1868, 64, 74. Here you can see the main positions of these reforms and the portrait of Minister of War, Military Minister Dmitry Milutin. The first position, a reduction of the army by 40%, a reduction of the army by 40%, creation of military and cadet schools, What's important, representatives of all classes can take a part in these schools. The third one, improvement of the military control system, the introduction of military districts in 1864, introduction of military districts, and the establishment of the general staff. General staff is воинский устав. New general staff. The next point, creation of military courts. And military prosecutor's office. Abolition of corporal punishment in army. The fifth point, abolition of corporal punishment. Introduction of new forces military regulations. Воинские уставы, да? Introduction of new forces military regulations. Seven points. Rearmament of the army and navy. Rearmament, перевооружение. Rearmament of the army and navy. And instead recruitment system in 1874 there was an introduction of conscription. Under the new law, which called on young people under 21 years, it was prohibited to call only a son of his parents, only a son of his parents, prohibited, запрещено, да? Only a son of his parents, the only breadwinner in the family, breadwinner, кормилец, breadwinner in the family, the only breadwinner in the family, and if the elder brother was serving, if the elder brother was serving. Duration of military service was in the army 15 years, in the army 15 years, 6 years in service and 9 years in reserve. 6 years in service, in active service, and 9 years in reserves. 15 years. And in the Navy, 7 years active duty and 3 years in the reserve. 7 years active duty and 3 years in the reserve. 10 years in total. Total terms 10 years in Navy. Yeah? If someone graduated from primary education, if you graduated primary education, yeah, term would be reduced to 4 years. 4 years. If you graduated from public school, the duration was reduced to 3 years. 3 years. If you graduated high school, 1.5 year. 1.5 year. And if you have a higher education, only 6 months. 6 months. That's that. That was a military reforms. Okay. And the next reform was a reform of education system. On the 18th of June in 1863, Emperor Alexander II approved a new general statute of the Imperial Russian Universities. General Statute of the Imperial Russian Universities. According to this document, all the universities in Russia had to have 4 faculties. History and philology, 1 faculty. Physics and math. Legal, law faculty, and medical faculty. 4 faculties in every university. Rectors or presidents was elected every 4 years by University Council. Rectors was elected every 4 years by University Council. Vice rectors elected by University Council as well, but for 3 years. Vice rectors for 3 years. The student could be a young person who has reached the age of 17 years old and graduated from the high school or passed an exam and had certificate. Then there were 3 academic degrees. There were 3 academic degrees according to this document: candidate, master, and doctor. Candidate, master, and doctor. All the universities in Russia were only under the care of the emperor and bore the name of imperial. All the universities were imperial. Okay? The next document was the regulation of elementary schools. And statute of gymnasiums and progymnasiums. Gymnasiums were secondary schools, and progymnasiums secondary schools with reduced training period, 4 years. Local zemstvas be allowed to open primary schools and secondary schools divided into classical and real. Classical schools and real schools. Classical schools or gymnasiums. Gymnasium, да? Classical schools and real schools. Progymnasiums created with the reduced training period of 4 years. Progymnasiums differed from gymnasiums, their training terms. And the last reform, the next slide please, the last reform, constitutional project of constitution. Russian intelligentsia perceived the reforms controversially. Liberal part of the intellectuals supported the government. Liberal part supported. But radicals created protest movement, and this protest movement were called Narodniks. Protest movement Narodniks. The aim of Narodniks was a peasantry revolution and commune socialism. Peasant revolution and commune socialism. And Narodniks were divided into 3 main groups. Narodniks divided into 3 main groups. Propagandists. They prefer propaganda as the main method of activity. Anarchists, and terrorist groups. The last group was headed by Tkachov, Nechayev, and others. Demanded to kill the emperor. The last group demanded to kill the emperor and made 5 assassinations, 5 assassination attempts, unsuccessful assassination attempts, yeah? And as you know, the 6th attempt was successful. Unfortunately, was successful. The new Minister of Interior, General Michael Loris Melikov, incorporated the 3rd section into the police department of the Ministry of Interior, incorporated the 3rd section into the Ministry of Interior police department, and he drew up a project for associating elected representatives, associating elected representatives with the tasks of legislation, This body was not a parliamentary government.